What's up, everybody? So the next IC I would like to go through is Gemini. And if you have a Gemini IC, that means your fourth house, which is your house of home, is ruled by Gemini, which means that your childhood, your upbringing would have a very Gemini energy to it. And just a reminder, Gemini is the sign of the twins. And so you have one twin over here, one twin over here, and they're just always talking to each other. But they're not always having the same conversation. Sometimes this one's talking about something else. Sometimes this one's talking about something completely different. So it's the sign of communication, it's the sign of learning, the sign of siblings, the sign of education. But communication is really where we're going to focus our attention. So growing up in a household like this with a Gemini IC, communication was everywhere in your household. So there was a lot of talking and a lot of chatter going on. Whether it was good or bad is determined by other chart factors, but your parents, your siblings, there was a lot of talking going on in the household, and one parent probably talked more than the other, or they both talked a lot, but they talked about different things. So with Gemini, there's a lot of variation with the energy. So your mom would be talking about, this over here, and your dad would be talking about this over here, or vice versa. And in a household like this, because there's so much talking, you had trouble getting your point across, and you had trouble communicating what you wanted to communicate because everyone else was always dominating the conversation. With this placement, a lot of times these are younger siblings or the youngest in a family. Not always, but for the most part, there's a battle with the siblings going on as far as communication goes and as far as talking goes. So being at the dinner table, it might have been hard to get your point across and to, get various things out that you wanted to express. So as a result of this, the conversation could start, and this person's saying this, this person's saying this, this person's saying this, and then you're waiting for your chance to come in and say what's on your mind, especially as you get older. And a lot of times in childhood, you just don't have that opportunity. There's just not enough time, not enough, you're not quick enough to be able to express yourself yet. So what happens is that you kind of start to shut down a little bit and you start to go into your own mind. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury. It is the sign of rationality and the mind, and Mercury rules kind of our thought process. So here you start asking questions. This is what the twins do really well. What the Gemini twins do really well is that they start asking questions like, why isn't anyone listening to me? What should I do? Why did they say that? Why did they not want to hear what I had to say? All these questions start running through your head. So you have this running course of questions, and this can create a lot of restlessness in an individual. And so you start to develop nervousness as a result of this. So all that pent up energy of needing to communicate, needing to do something, you start to get nervous. And so what is common here is people biting their nails, people pulling their hair out, people twirling their hair. Just depends what what comes out, but there's something mental comes out, and Gemini rules the hands. And so it could do with the hands. You need to touch something. You need to do something with your hands. Also, this sign rules education. So your household is probably very intellectual in some sort of way. So either one parent was or another. Your parents could be teachers. They could be orators in some sort of way, writers even, but they were communicators in some sense. Now, with Gemini, sometimes you're actually not the best student, and especially when it's in the fourth house. But what happens is, because the sign is also very clever, you start to develop ways around, needing to do well in school. So you may become the class clown because you're so quick on your feet. Mercury rules Gemini. Mercury was the messenger of the gods who could zip from here to like Mount Olympus like that. So your mind moves very fast. You started to observe and take in and listen really well. So even though you couldn't communicate, so like communication's a two-way street where like you're listening and then you're responding. You didn't do a lot of the responding, but you did a lot of the listening. And so you're able to take in observations and little subtleties that like other people just don't quite understand or get. And so like you're able to then be very quick and adaptable and on your feet and like skirt issues. So let's say, you know, you're not doing well in school, you can, you know, be funny or tell a quick anecdote that takes the attention away from that. But one frustrating thing about this placement is that, you know, your childhood is marked and your adolescence is marked with like, you need to communicate. You need to get your thoughts out of like, you know, gossiping and getting your feelings out and like understanding the world as you go through these various stages of life. And so like where this can be frustrating is that no one's really hearing what you're saying. So like you're not able to talk to your mom as much or your dad as much about like the world and what's going on. And okay, you know, she said this to me. What does that mean? Does she like me? Does she not like me? He said this to me. I think he's bullying me. I think he's, you know, like all these different things go through your mind of questions and like answers that you want, but no one's there to really hear them. And like your siblings are doing something else. And when the conversation does come around where you are talking about, you know, school, like you want to get something out, but the conversation's moving so quickly that it's like an ADD sort of environment. It gets very scattered, and then something else happens, and then everyone's attention goes that way, and then something else happens, then everyone leaves the room to go over here, and then you're left in the dust thinking, I just wanted to talk about my day at school, and no one hears you. So like a big thing you could do here is like, or that you might have done in childhood, is like journaling. Making up stories to get attention. Gemini is very quick and adaptable on its feet, but they could be very much like, I'm gonna make up this story so I can get some attention, because that's not what you're getting. You're not getting attention from really anybody. So that can be very frustrating. And another piece of this is that you start to develop such nervousness about wanting to get your point across that it develops anxiety. And so like, that could be something that's left over from childhood, is like this need and this nervousness to talk, because your nerves and your nervous system are just like rattling all the time, because like you're waiting to say something, or you're anticipating a lot. And a lot of that is coming from like this anxious environment that you grew up in. So where this then gets countered is that we go up to the MC in the chart, which is like your career and who you are out in the world. And so that's the total opposite sign. Now we're in a fire sign, which is Sagittarius. And Sagittarius, as I've said in other videos, is all about getting its point across. It's very opinionated, it's very blunt, and it speaks its truth. Now, this is medicine to a Gemini IC, because like finally you're able to get it out. Finally, you're able to say what is on your mind. And so like, but you could go really far with this and be so opinionated, so blunt, so like a fire hose almost, that you just spew it everywhere. And like, it feels good and people listen to you, and you realize like there's a variety of different people, and it's not just, you know, one or the other in society and in your career and all of that. But you want to temper that. Like, you don't want it to be like so much that like then you blast people away, even though like you're wanting to get this out. So the key is then like to figure out what your truth is, and like where that really comes in is understanding your own voice. So what was missing in childhood for you was like you're like vocally you couldn't get something out, but you also couldn't get your ideas out. So like voice, yes, it has to do with speaking, but it also has to do with like your personality, who you are as a person. And, you know, think of voice in writing, where you have like a character who has like a distinct personality and voice, or an author, or someone's writing. Like you can tell who the writer is. What's interesting about this is that a couple celebrities who have this are Michael Jackson, George Clooney, J.K. Rowling, Ellen DeGeneres, and there's a lot of other ones, but like those already, you can see like they have a distinct voice to them. You know them. You know who they are. You know like what they sound like, and you know like even J.K. Rowling, like you know her writing. Like she is very distinct in the way that she writes. Ellen DeGeneres is very distinct in the way that she speaks, but also in the way that she hosts and things like that. And Michael Jackson speaks, you know, for himself as far as like his distinctness. But that's where like if you get a handle of like your voice and who you are, and really like in your home, determining like what is it that speaks to you? Like what are the things that you want to put in your home? What are the conversations that you want to have in your own home, and the people you want to have in your home too? Because you don't have to have everyone around, you know? Chances are like you had a variation of different people coming in and out of the house when you were younger. You don't have to have that. You get to curate and determine who comes into your home and who you want to have a conversation with. And that's really, really important, is to like develop your own voice of like, okay, if this guitar were to talk, what type of guitar would I want? Or even an instrument. Like if I had an instrument in here that could talk, like what do I want it to be? What type of couch do I want? Like how does that communicate to me? It goes, you know, into things like that. And then you start to cool down that Sagittarian MC, where it's like you're really grounded at home. The scatteredness starts to become more concrete. It becomes more streamlined. And as a result, you feel like you can just communicate from a place of truth and knowing that you don't need like validation from everyone. And that's a really big pitfall of like Gemini in the 4th house, and Gemini energy in general, is validation. Seeking this like faux validation from people because like, you know, you're saying what they want you to, or you're saying what, they want you to hear. So like Gemini can be a chameleon in this way, where it can go to this group and it can go to this group and it can go to this group and say like, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. And then everyone, you know, you're friends with everyone. But in a sense, you feel really hollow and inauthentic inside, because that's not really your ideas. It's not really who you are. Maybe it is. But to do that in so many different groups, there's some authenticity lost. So you want to be careful of that, like of seeking too much validation when you don't need to. Like what you have to say is important. You just have to find the people and the groups that truly will listen to it. All the celebrities I listed, like they're confident, you know, they were confident in their own voices, or are confident enough where like people now follow them. They are interested in them. And that is the power of a Gemini IC, is that once you find that voice and once you find, you know, that groundedness, your voice is very, very powerful. Very powerful. Hope you enjoyed this. Cancer IC is next, and then Leo will follow that. And I'll see you guys soon. All right, take care. Peace.